Hi, I'm Stacey.
And I'm Rox.
And we are the Sofa Detectives.
So this is part 2 in our Emma Fillipoff mini-series.
Today we're going to be discussing people of interest and key people in the case.
Okay, cool. So let's jump right into it. It's happening.
It is happening. Warning! Warning! Just a quick warning for everyone's watching today. We discuss sensitive subjects and mature themes.
And we swear a lot, and this is some heavy shit.
People of interest.
I got my comfy cushion again just to interrupt you, and you're just hugging
I just think
yourself.
really strange. Welcome to our world. So last time obviously we discussed everything mental health, and we touched on different people that were in the case. So we thought we'd go into a little bit more details of those people and how we think they're, how they stand out or how. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So who do you want us to kick off with?
So why don't we just kick off with her mum and family, and then work out from there?
Well, that sounds perfect.
Well, that sounds so clever.
So her mum was called Shelley. That was really aggressive.
Shelley!
I'm sorry, Shelley.
Poor Shelley.
Poor Shelley. She's been through enough.
Yes. She doesn't need this shit.
Me screaming at her. Sorry. Back on track. So Shelley was her mum.
Yeah.
And she lived, was it Ontario with her mum and her dad, and I don't know if they split up while she was away or before that. Before.
It was before.
So they divorced.
And she wrote in journals about how she was always being the emotional support for mainly her dad.
Mainly her dad, I think she said. Yeah.
How much the divorce weighed on him and how it weighed on the whole family, and it kind of, they sort of used her for that emotional support. And she seems like she's maybe one of those people who would have just done that naturally, but wouldn't have maybe expressed just how difficult it was for her. No, I think
she was extremely empathetic, so it obviously weighed really heavy. Afterwards it weighed really heavily on her.
I think that was one of the main reasons that she then chose to, because she went travelling, and I think didn't she teach English overseas?
I think so.
For a short time, and then she came back, and then she decided obviously to move to, was it Perth? No, that's Perth,
Victoria.
Victoria, so obviously she had mum, had dad, she had a brother. Did you read as
well? She had a brother. I thought she only had a sister.
She had a brother, so recently.
Oh my god, yes, she did have a brother.
Mum got arrested for having drugs and weapons in the house.
Yeah, and it was her brother.
And it turned out to be her brother who was involved in some crazy weapons ring. And he had put the weapons in his mum's house without her knowledge.
Oh yeah,
and got
she
raided,
was arrested.
and then she was arrested. Thankfully, she was then
completely forgotten about
proven innocent in that. It's could any more shit happen?
Yeah,
to this poor woman. Yeah. So that's their basic family construct. Then there was.
They didn't say much about her sister, but I think in one of them they interviewed her.
She had a sister.
Yeah, I think, but only briefly. They don't mention her much, but obviously she misses her and that she was gone. And then her best friend. So I think there was the best friend.
I remember the best friend
and the sister, but they only touched on them very slightly.
She was quite interesting to watch. I don't know, you could tell she really loved her.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you really could.
You could still feel that, even.
Yeah, you could see how much pain she's in that she's gone. It must be heartbreaking for everybody.
Yeah, you've got this best friend or daughter or sister, and then one day you don't. It's just it's unimaginable. Then there was Julian, who wasn't he? They were seeing each other.
Yeah,
at one point for a short
they
time.
met at a party, through mutual friends. He became completely besotted with her.
He was infatuated.
But it was very instant. But apparently a lot of people that met her just loved her instantly. Yeah. But also in a normal way.
In an orderly fashion.
But it just became a bit of an obsession.
Yeah.
There was I think Facebook posts and Facebook messages to her dad, because she rarely went online, didn't have a phone.
So she didn't have a mobile
really contact her. So when he was I want to see her again, she ended up going on one walk with him. I don't know if it's because he showed up at her dad's house or what happened, or he finally got her on the phone at her dad's house, and convinced her to meet him, basically.
Right, yeah.
So then she obviously went for a walk with him, and he, like, even in his interview, he was like, oh, she was very cold and detached compared to what
Like,
she
because
was
you were stalking
the first time we
her,
met.
like-
Yeah, like, she obviously felt overwhelmed with that and felt like she had to see him because he wouldn't stop calling her dad and messaging her dad. But then she explained to him, you know, like, politely that she wasn't interested in a relationship, she's moving soon, she wants to travel, like, she wants to live her life. She doesn't want to be tied down. Yeah, she doesn't want to be tied down to someone she literally just met.
Yeah.
But she didn't want her plans to change. And she obviously, this is my opinion, didn't feel much for him.
No, I mean, it's
like,
really
but you can't that instantly,
much,
right?
yeah.
Especially when they're not giving you any space.
Yeah.
Like, it seemed like she had no breathing room for him.
There was him, and then there was obviously the various friends that she had when she moved, including the one man who. So they polygraphed Julian / stalkery guy twice, and he passed both polygraphs.
Yeah, he did.
And then they also polygraphed her friend. Oh, I can't remember his name now.
No, I can't. He's the one that did the wellness check. Like, he's the one that called the wellness check.
Police, and the one that insisted that, you know, the police come and, like you said, did the wellness check.
Yeah.
They polygraphed him, and he passed.
Yeah, he passed.
And
I think they also maybe polygraphed the later on 6-year guy.
Oh,
not that he saw her 6 years later, but that he reported 6 years later that he'd seen her. I think maybe he was polygraphed, but he's been interviewed on. I haven't actually listened to it yet because there's so much information on this case. But there was a podcast. I'll drop the link below, because apparently the woman whose podcast it is, she's heavily involved in the search for Emma.
Oh, okay.
And she interviewed him.
That's interesting.
So we might have to do an update. Like as I said, we might have to do an update once I've listened to that.
Yeah.
Or in part 3, I could give you like if I've listened to it.
Yeah. Sneaky part 3.
Sneaky part 3.
And then there were obviously the police that did the wellness check. There were the people that worked at the women's shelter where she was living.
Yes, so many people.
And then there was this mysterious guy, like, do we know if he was real or not, who she was potentially going to be going to Mexico with. Of course,
yeah, just the older man.
And then there was also, was it sort of weeks later after she disappeared, or months later?
I think it might have been months later.
Yeah. There was a guy in another part of Canada that had gone into a shop and had in his hand, in his hand pulled down flyer of, like, the missing flyer of Emma.
Oh yeah, like the missing person.
Yeah, missing person. He's gone into a shop and been like, this is Emma, but she's not missing. She's my girlfriend, and she's happy. She doesn't want to be found.
Yeah,
they never have been able to track that guy down.
No.
Could he have been the older man? Like,
yeah, it kind of fits. Like
because he did look like he was older than her, and she was only young.
No, yeah, of course. He apparently seemed really agitated because I think the police not investigated but spoke to the shopkeeper, because this is how they found out what they said, right? Yeah, I think
had the missing persons flyer in his hand.
I think they called and reported it, and then they explained that he was, like, proper agitated.
Yeah.
He came in, and even in the CCTV, like, footage, they're stills, aren't they? It's not actually him walking. You see 2 stills of him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is stills.
But he does look.
He looks angry.
He looks really, like, agitated and like furious. And so maybe they approached him and asked him if he was okay or something, and then explained that, you know, he had a missing persons flyer. She's not missing. She left because she hates her parents. And she doesn't want to be found. So this could add up. Like, maybe she decided to leave with someone.
Especially with the guy who worked in the fishing tackle shop saying that she came in and said, "How do you disappear?" Is that everyone? Is that everyone that's mainly involved?
Yes, I think
I think it is.
Yeah, that's the main people.
I mean, with the parents, it's really apparent. I mean, obviously they're like, they've been divorced for years now, but you can really see the difference in their approaches. Like, the dad is very much like, Emma's only going to come back off her own back and her own volition.
He was quite laid back.
Hope that she's okay, blah blah blah. I did feel like it felt a little bit weird how laid back he was, but at the same time you think to yourself, well, perhaps he's spent years in pure hell emotionally. Maybe he's made his peace with the idea that hopefully she's alive
she's
and
fine.
she will return.
Yeah, I think the way he was speaking about her is that she
how
is
he
out
deals with
there and living her best life, like, and that she will come back when she's ready. Like, that's the kind of feel I got from him. Like, it's like he didn't, as you say, like, we don't know how many years
it's in such stark contrast with his ex-wife Shelley, has such a sense of urgency to find her, has never stopped believing that she will find her.
And never stopped looking, obviously,
that if she'll never stop looking, because that means that she's given up. She's gone to basically live kind of almost within these homeless communities.
She does.
Like, she doesn't live as a homeless person, but she's speaking to people constantly. She's doing the groundwork that she believes that the police should have done and should still be doing, essentially. So their approaches really, they're seem like they could be any more different.
Yeah, they're very dramatic. Like,
obviously we don't really know these people, but from what's being portrayed.
Yeah, and just like the snippets of videos that we've seen of them in the different interviews, he did seem way more laid back, but it's like he has the attitude that in his own mind he knows she's okay.
Yeah.
Because he said at the end that the only way that we'll find Emma is Emma, through Emma, like her bringing herself back, basically. And I pray for them that happens.
Yeah, it suggests that that's how he deals with the idea that she is gone.
Yeah, because people deal with grief in different ways. Like, he's like, she's still out there,
and
she's
she
happy,
could be.
She's healthy.
And
she really could be.
Is that she really
He's like a glass half full type dude.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's certainly how he came across. I think that, we both discussed before the idea that, like, she could have decided to disappear and be living somewhere else. She could have decided to disappear and be living with the guy that tore down the poster. She could also have decided to disappear and gone into the woods and either succumbed to the elements or been taken
Yes, actually, that's what I thought. She could have, say, the day that the gentleman had driven her up the road.
Hydration.
She obviously walking around with no shoes on, is just pootling about up the road. She could have then just gone off, because there's a history of her like sleeping in trees. Actually, I don't think we've mentioned.
No, we didn't mention that.
So if she didn't have anywhere to sleep, she would just sleep in a tree, like very free spirit. So maybe that's what she did. But it's November, and she could have wandered too far into the wilderness. She could have got hurt. But we don't know any of these things. But
knowledge of the area that she's wandering into.
Yeah, of course.
You can go in, you can get lost, you can not be able to come out again. So obviously those are so many different
there's so many possibilities. Like, it could be that she was being stalked and she was running for her life.
Yeah.
It could be that person took her. Those are like the most extreme, I think, versions. Or she could have just wandered off and she could just be somewhere.
With the guy who had stalked her on the interviews, I mean, he's passed both polygraph tests. They don't seem to have any reason to obviously look at him any further. But for me, he freaked me out a little bit. Like, that's just how I felt personally.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that he did anything to her, because we will just absolutely never know. I know that, we were seeing that in the comments of certain videos, people were sort of like, didn't he say, he'd love to build her a cabin in the woods?
I'm not sure where that particular person had seen that.
No. Like, there's so many videos.
There's so many comments, documentaries, blogs, podcasts. Like, there's a wealth of information on this case. It's hard to know where these facts are coming from. But there was one comment under one of the videos on YouTube that we had watched, and they'd mentioned that he had told her in a letter that he would build her a cabin in the woods or something.
So some people were theorising that he'd done that and he was holding her hostage, but obviously
he might not be. He could have got her a cabin in the woods, and we're not saying that he's keeping her there because he wants to. She could be staying there because she wants to, because she wanted to get away and she wanted to be off grid. She wanted to, she could just be doing that. She could be living off grid and has no idea people are, frantically searching for her 8 years later. I think
it must be the hardest thing though. Like, if you assume that he is completely innocent, it must be the hardest thing in the world though. Like, when you have done some really shady shit and then you didn't actually kill the person.
Yeah, I think
everyone's always going to be like, well, there's some shit going on there.
I think he had the second polygraph because he was getting so much aggravation from people that were like, well, I don't know what they were exactly saying to him. But
That's what they were saying.
They're like,
you and
it's
your
you,
ways.
it's you. It got very musical.
As it always does.
So I think he took the second one, like he requested
To
it
just
himself because he was like, look, I've
yeah.
done this, I want to clear my name. So I think maybe there may have been a legitimate stalker that's not Julian that we don't know about. Or I think because her mental state was so bad, and that she kept bumping into him, could be coincidentally, could be because he wanted to. I think maybe she thought he was stalking her.
Yeah.
Like because she kept seeing him.
Or maybe he was stalking.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe she thought he was.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was. Maybe he was.
Yeah.
Like so. This is why we're like, there's just so many factors. It could have been him, or it could have been that she thought it was him. It could have been that she thought it was someone else.
It could have been that she had maybe been assaulted by someone and she was then running from
someone, like an unknown someone that no one has pointed out yet.
It's interesting though that she had this issue with being around men, and then suddenly this kind of older man character, you know, I mean,
that she was
out of nowhere, and no one.
Oh yeah, so the older man,
to be with him.
the older man. That was mentioned by friends, so like she'd said she was going to go on a boat to Mexico, but there's like reports from, I don't know, just people that lived in the area that said they had seen her. I don't know what time it was, around like between 6 and 7, so before that she had been seen by the police and before she'd been seen by that guy. There were reports that she was seen walking around the local area with an older man.
Him.
So obviously it's an older man exists. We don't know if that's the same boatman or boatman.
I don't know where that came from.
Well, I don't know.
But it's good.
You still said boatman. I was expecting Batman.
Oh, just when you think I'm gonna zig, I zag. So obviously there's that guy, and then there are the people that worked in the shelter, but there's not really anything specifically said.
No, they don't really mention them, other than the fact that they had mentioned stuff about her. They don't talk about anyone in particular at the shelter.
And there's not really anything specific said about the police officers. Just
the shelter people. The shelter people. The only thing is they also had a wellness check done on her.
Yes.
But no one came out, so they just said, like, if things continue, if she gets
wellness check.
Yeah, they just didn't come. They just said to them, you know,
no wellness for you.
It just seems weird. Like, if they were concerned enough and they're a shelter in the area, you would think that would cause people to come.
Yeah.
But they just said maybe they were, I don't know, low on bobbies. I don't know, but because it happens, right? And they're like on our priority list that at the moment isn't high priority.
Yeah.
I've been trying to not talk with my hands and that's all coming out.
I like it.
Little dance for you. They didn't come out, they just said to them if things got worse with her, if like, you know,
keep us
if she deteriorates more, call back. They didn't end up calling back because it might have been quite close to the time that she disappeared.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, the timeline on that phone call, but they never ended up calling back until they are the people that called back and reported her missing. I think.
Because they said she didn't take up her place within the shelter
that night,
and they reported
which was
that
unusual.
to her mum as well, I think.
Yeah, because she turned up to find her, and they're like, she didn't claim her bed tonight. She hasn't come back, and that was.
And they missed each other by 3 hours.
3 hours.
I mean, how shitty must you feel? Like if you're Shelley, like
gutting.
That's what I mean.
So close.
Yeah. And then the police officers, they were just the people that did the wellness check. There's not really anything mentioned about them.
No alarm bells about them.
The only other two people were her friend who called for the wellness check.
Yes.
He was polygraphed.
Another friend that saw her at her soup kitchen that day.
Yeah.
A gentleman who said she was acting very strange, and she actually said, I don't feel well, and that's the only thing she said to him. Yeah. And he said, oh, do you want to hug, you know, like,
oh, do you want to hug? And she backed away in terror, didn't she? She was
she looked at him like in complete horror and just left, didn't say anything else, just left.
Yeah.
So when they spoke to him, that's obviously what he told them.
He reported.
But that's the only thing. But obviously that just shows how, you know, scared of men she was at that point. And this is supposed to be one of her friends
she knows and is friends with. Exactly. So someone she doesn't really have a reason to be fearful of. Yeah. But the thing is you think to yourself, well, if that's how she felt around a friend,
and it's them that attacked her, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it might not have been that person, but you think, well, could it have been a friend?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's
Something
that's put her off, and now she doesn't trust anybody.
Yeah, and then the only other person in the case was this gentleman who went into the shop
with the green t-shirt.
And I think they did try to track this guy down.
Yeah, I think that they put the images out, the two stills.
Oh, and the guy that gave her a lift. The only other thing
the taxi driver.
I was about to mention was the taxi driver.
Weird. I knew what you were going to say.
Something we didn't touch on in the previous one about the previous segment about mental health was that we did touch on the taxi driver, but we didn't mention about the fact that she was reported to be looking at the communications box in the cab and being like, why is there noise coming out of that? And she said that she couldn't afford the fare, but then when it came to, she asked to be dropped off somewhere else.
Yeah.
He took her there. When he got there, she was like, "Can I sit in the cab?" She was being super paranoid.
Yeah, she didn't want to leave the taxi.
She was like, "Can I stay in the cab?" And he was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, okay." And then once she started becoming really agitated,
he asked her to
about
get out.
the communications box, like, "Oh, why is there noise coming out of that?" Like the boxes in taxis where like the person in the office tells you the next fare.
Yeah, like the dispatcher, and they're like, "Oh, go here
that's
next."
When, like you say, he was like, "I think it's time for you to get out now," because obviously he's then thinking, "What on earth is going on?" You know,
yeah, because he obviously thought she was acting
that was obviously a very small.
A brief encounter,
is that
right?
Most of the people in the case, like, not that they're guilty or anything, but the people that knew her, play such tiny little cameo roles. And
it just starts to add up.
Yeah,
so it's just really hard to piece anything serious together.
There's basically, apart from Emma, there's basically no main characters when you really think about it.
No, maybe her mum.
But I know who was actually involved in her disappearance.
It just...
There's
it just screams
real
her, doesn't
people that you can... Because the guy that went into the shop, you could say, oh, well, that was a person who potentially was her boyfriend. But we have no idea. He could have just been a person who was like, oh, I'm just going to say this. Or,
there's so many possibilities with him. He could have just been lying.
Yeah.
Like, he could have just done it because he could. He could be her boyfriend and know where she is, and they are travelling around together.
He could have done something terrible.
I was going to say, it could have been him that did something terrible, and that's why he doesn't want the posters up.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so many things that...
When
they've never been able to speak to him.
The same programme, they had, was it 3 or 4 different guys, and they were analysing it from different angles. And they basically finished in the same place they started with, same as us. Like,
so many unknowns.
There's so much information, and yet so little information. And in the end, it's like, at the start, these are the possibilities. At the end, these are the same possibilities.
Yeah, I was hoping they would know more, but there's no new info. No, there's not.
Them.
Apparently, they still get there's still the Facebook page and website. They still get constant tips, but none of them lead anywhere. Some people were giving tips that they've seen Emma in Canada in certain parts, ripping down her own things, ripping down her own wanted posters. I mean, like missing posters.
Yeah.
We're not in the cowboy era.
Dead or alive.
I'm liking how musical it is. So ripping down her own ones, but obviously they've never been able to verify any of these sightings because none of it's on CCTV. Like, they haven't got any good witnesses. Like, it's just that one person. They don't have anyone backing up their stories and stuff.
There was the other there was a photograph that popped up on, I think it was Flickr, and people were like, oh my god, is this Emma? So it's basically a photograph of a woman sat in a coffee shop facing the window, just at like a coffee at the bar, just drinking a cup of coffee. And it's photograph. It's taken from here, so you can sort of see this much of her face. It looks exactly like her.
Side profile.
Yeah, sort of profile. But then and her dad, who was a photographer, was like, oh my god, that's her, like, this is her.
Everyone thought it was. And also, obviously we don't know her, but when we saw it, we were like...
it really looks like her.
You're like, actually, that does look
and then
a lot like
afterwards,
her.
The lady who was in the photo, I think it was taken by maybe a photographer, like...
For a project
yeah. And the woman who was in the photo was like, no, that's me. I'm not her. And so it was like another blow to...
And she probably looked like her.
Yeah, they looked very like, especially from that angle.
Well, I guess if you're not...
Straight on,
like... Yeah. I think that's the only other guy.
No.
There's one guy.
There's another guy.
This is what happens. Unfortunately, as you say, there's like all these little cameos, if you will, of these people, and the information they're giving us is so small, like it's not enough.
It's the tiniest little bite of a puzzle.
Yeah, and you
piece.
start piecing it together, and you're like, but there's like vast gaps, and there's this. The only other person was the person that found the prepaid credit card.
Totally forgot about him. He was a drunk, wasn't he? And
He's like a self-confessed drunk. He couldn't really remember where he got it.
He couldn't take the police to where he found the
exact location, because he didn't remember.
And didn't he say, he was like, I'm pretty sure I kept it for like a week before I used it.
Yeah, and he just bought cigarettes with it, didn't it? And it also had the full balance on, so it'd never been used before. He used it because it's the first time it'd been flagged as being used.
To get cigarettes.
Yeah, to get cigarettes. But I'm sure he said it was like when they were like, oh, if you kept it for a week, it was roughly the day after
she disappeared.
So the same day that she ended up hitchhiking is possibly the day that he found it, but that's not confirmed, and he also can't confirm that.
No.
He doesn't remember much. I think so, but he remembered so very little.
Yeah, they couldn't ask him.
Yeah, he was like a self-confessed alcoholic, wasn't he? And he was like that whole week's just like a blur, like a blackout.
He came forward.
No.
Did he not? For some reason, I thought.
What happened was when he was at a petrol station or like a corner shop, and he used the card. It was flagged for use.
That's what it was, of course.
Because obviously they'd put maybe an alert on it. Yeah. So that's how they found out who used it. Apparently, though, the phone she bought the same day was never activated, so they can't trace it, which is gutting because it was just never activated. The card this guy found just on the floor with nothing else.
All the things that she didn't want, she never wanted to have a mobile phone, and she didn't like that. She was known to hate texting.
Yeah.
The only thing she really liked was email, because I guess it's sort of
the
like
only
a letter writing.
Yeah, because she liked letter writing
and poetry and stuff. But if she had potentially if she had a phone and had it on,
they could have probably tracked her. But that's probably why she didn't activate the phone in the end.
Yeah, because she didn't want to be
tracked. Maybe theorising, obviously. I think that is all.
I think that is it for people, and we'll see you on the 3rd instalment of the Emma Fillipoff mini-series.
Until next time, stay paranoid.